So first and foremost, thank you, Sophie and John, for making this possible. Greatly appreciated. And so in consideration of the tree, when we consider what makes a tree, we usually think of biology and anatomy. But is that knowledge enough to realize long-term tree growth in the context of the built environment? Today's presentation is based on a chapter I was invited to write for a course book project currently in press. The book's theme, ecological design. The primary audience, planners, architects, and landscape architects, to whom I have offered my professional soup to nuts recipe for growing large canopy urban trees well into maturity. The sections of that recipe offered today concern how best to mitigate the two primary impediments to growing urban trees: soil volume and spatial development. The urban forest includes trees in a variety of landscapes: traditional forest, open landscape, and isolated plantings. The ability of a tree to grow, be it in the forest or the streets of a city, is the interaction of its genetic capacity combined with the environmental conditions that enable those capacities. Almost all our urban tree species are forest trees, originating in a forest somewhere in the world. Given how our built environment has evolved, it is critical that our understanding of what makes a tree includes its origins, its forest persona, and the context in which it evolved. What exactly is a forest ecosystem? And how does that drive the genetics that these trees bring to an urban ecosystem? A forest is a complex adaptive ecosystem, a community of trees and all their associates, related flora, fauna, plus soil with its organic layer, supporting a mycorrhizal network and containing a functioning microbial and invertebrate community, which, in combination, provides the air, water, and nutrients all associates in the forest community depend on, either directly or indirectly. Forests are a process of evolution. Forests don't happen in a day, a week, or a year. They occur over millennia, beginning with the specific soils they populate. Forests evolve in direct relationship to their environment, temperature, the soil's pH, and the availability of light and water will help determine what species are growing and where. Although a forest may consist of different tree species, space above ground is shared in competition, while space below ground is shared in community. Trees are social. They are collaborators depending on a communal rooting landscape, providing interspecies communication while enhancing self-management mechanisms, such as sharing of nutrients and early warning for defense purposes. Photosynthesis delivers the energy that propels the entire system's processes. While photosynthesis is primarily a function of leaves, trees also photosynthesize through their bark, woody tissue photosynthesis. The active chloroplast population is located in the cortex just under the bark, as well as in ray cells and even in pith, supporting bud development, root growth, carbohydrate allocation, and the refixing of internal concentrations of respired CO2. Tree architecture is reiterative, based on species-specific arrangement of fundamental parts such as branches. Individual forest trees will adapt their dynamic architecture to interspatial relationships that affect access to light, crown space, or gravitational demands on structure. As forest trees increase in height and crown space intensifies, their lowest branches may receive less and less light, reducing the ability of these branches to maintain their own needs and contribute to the tree's overall upkeep. The tree may then initiate branch shedding by forming a basal protection zone, divorcing the branch from resources supplied by the tree, ensuring branch death. Before the dying branch is shed, all usable resources that have been stored in the branch will be reclaimed by the tree. Trees grow with their root crown above the soil line, as do all parts of the tree that are covered with bark, which requires light and air to function. A tree's root system begins at the trunk-root transition zone, with the development of at least one first-order root in each of the 4 cardinal directions. The extension of these first-order roots forms the perennial framework responsible for structural support, transport, and storage. Roots branch out horizontally, decreasing their diameter, the zone of rapid taper, as they grow into fine non-woody roots, which, along with their mycorrhizal fungi, are responsible for the uptake of water and nutrients. Growth is opportunistic. Root exploration of the underground landscape depends on the presence of oxygen, water, and nutrient availability. Almost all of this extension activity occurs within the top meter of soil, with fibrous roots in the uppermost portion and even into the decomposing forest floor litter, extending approximately 2.5 to 3 times the width of the crown, depending species and environment. Forest soil is always covered by related flora, leaf litter, or other organic forest detritus, a constant recycling and renewing of organic resources. We now have the forest context for our urban tree palettes evolution. Genetically, our urban trees remain forest trees with the capacity to manage themselves. To enable that forest tree's capacities and provide a tree-friendly environment in the urban spaces and places we are asking the forest tree to exist, we need to use all those self-management strategies as the basis for our planning, designing, and management. The understanding that you can take the tree out of the forest, but you can never take the forest out of the tree, must inform how we address those 2 primary factors: an adequate accessible volume of open living soil and a building with trees ecological approach to planning, designing, as well as protecting and retaining during the spatial development process. The art and science needed includes the ability to be an observer of everything within the work footprint, not just trees, soil, and their environment, but how construction-related disciplines and project sites function. So let's look at spatial development elements that minimize environmentally destructive practices, urban forester-driven details which, if incorporated, implemented, and enforced, can result in an ecological design accommodating trees that can grow into maturity and a healthier urban ecosystem for all its occupants. Planning and design, where an urban tree will grow. Site evaluation and preparation, or the planting site, the where the tree will exist, is an essential element, in the art of growing an urban tree and must be evaluated for environmental conditions and adapted and prepared for long-term tree growth. While the site must support canopy, as most tree-delivered ecosystem services, or ES benefits, are provided by leaf surface, top-driven, you can't have the top without the bottom. It is therefore difficult to talk about where an urban tree will exist without discussing what that tree will exist in, bringing us to the critical discussion of that landscape underground, the soil substrate that's underneath all the impervious urban surfaces. Sometimes referred to as an urban soil, and all too often defying the definition of what a soil is supposed to be. An ecosystem comprised of the inorganic, the organic, and the biotic, the soil food web, providing roots with life's enabling essentials. The urban difficulty, the soil can only provide the tree's roots with life's essentials if the soil is a living organism. To put the soil structure into a relational context, we can summarize important substrate properties as follows. Total pore space, which determines airspace, macropores, and water holding capacity, micropores. Bulk density, the volume of soil particles combined with the volume of macro and micropores within the soil particles, and particle size distribution, the soil aggregates. Without these physical properties, plus the organic layer and the living community that all of this supports, soils will become biologically inactive. From an ES benefits perspective, not only is an unsealed living soil essential to tree health, it is also the foremost terrestrial carbon sink, and, in conjunction with trees' roots, an essential part of urban water management, increasing water filtration and infiltration rates, improving the recharging of groundwater, as well as runoff interception and storage. This graphic offers a direct comparison between different accessible soil volumes and the tree size each volume can support. Unfortunately, the present approach to streetscape rarely considers the requirements of a tree. Rather, planners and designers usually focus on pedestrians. But if a design is to be successful from an ecological perspective, the design must consider both. An adequate accessible volume of unsealed living soil is exemplified by cluster planting, affording trees' roots a communal environment, sharing a larger unsealed volume of living soil, while requiring less total space in the landscape than linear curbside plantings. The result is a planting that, as trees mature, requires less maintenance to maintain tree health and can deliver an enhanced range of ES benefits to the residential community. Where space does not permit such a configuration, there are well-documented alternative strategies that provide for pedestrians while offering shared rooting space and a larger area of unsealed soil. This visual offers examples of such concepts using extended curbside beds. Although separated for pedestrian access, that limitation can be addressed through the use of various substrate techniques such as root paths, which allow for continuous rooting. The path should extend at least 30 centimeters into the open tree area, placing the root path opening in immediate proximity to the root ball. The walls of the resulting path should be compacted and lined with strips of drainage board and then filled with uncompacted soil, having the same pH and soil texture classification as the soil within the planting bed. When paving is installed, compaction of the substrate is required, instigating the problems. First, a sealed compacted substrate encourages root growth exactly where it will have conflicts with surrounding infrastructure, just under the surface of the paving, where condensation accumulates and pockets of air exist. Roots will explore and expand in these spaces, generating enough mechanical force to accentuate any structural or material faults present. Tree roots do not damage infrastructure. Rather, they take advantage of flaws in that infrastructure. In addition, essential tree root needs are normally accessed within the soil. But when soil is compacted, fundamental structural properties are eliminated. The soil can no longer function, not as a living organism, a carbon sink, an essential associate of trees' roots, or anything else environmentally beneficial. There are a number of alternative paving options, but the extent of substrate compaction will greatly affect soil attributes. What needs to inform our paving choice should be human usage combined with the greatest possibility for unimpeded tree root growth. The alternative surfaces in production today, along with their tree and soil advantages and disadvantages, are as follows. Dry laid pavers, the best for tree and soil, are set on a bed of tamped down sand with mason sand between the joints, requiring minimal substrate compaction. The sand acts as a cushion, which accommodates substrate irregularities and affords the uncompacted soil beneath the sand access to gas exchange and water infiltration. While the application of paving always reduces the organic layer, the fact that there is gas exchange and water infiltration can support a viable root system, which will, through life cycle processes, contribute fine root exudation of carbon compounds and senesced and decomposing root tissue to the soil. The dry laid technique also allows for easy adjustment to manage disturbance. The 3 Ps, porous, pervious, and permeable pavers that facilitate water resource management. Porous above and pervious below allow water filtration through the paver, while permeable pavers direct the water into joints that surround each otherwise impermeable paver, delivering a lesser amount of water infiltration than the other 2 options. Porous pavers are made of concrete with an open grid where the holes can be filled with vegetation or stones. Pervious pavers, traditionally made of concrete, contain voids which allow water infiltration across the entire surface of the paver. Continuous research has seen an evolution in materials, and a Japanese company has developed a permeable, pervious paver made of recycled ceramic materials. All of these pavers are installed over a gravel subbase, which acts as the interim reservoir for removed surface water. Proper maintenance is essential for retaining infiltration capacity, and each product comes with its own maintenance protocols. Since all hardscape installations require maintenance to extend their functionality and their useful lifetime, the product requirements and cost should not be an impediment to use, as one must also consider avoided costs. Where these paving solutions falter is, as always, the need to compact the substrate. To mitigate this drawback, these pavers can be combined with opening covered soil designs, root paths, plus root-friendly material such as structural soil. Structural soils are based on a stone matrix, which will, when compacted to the load-bearing protocol, form a matrix which has enough soil and voids as to accommodate gas exchange and moisture retention within the mixture, supporting tree root growth and communal root exploration. When combined with the 3 Ps, structural soil provides the subbase material as well as the substrate, positively addressing the paver's limitations. While CU soil is the US offering, one can find proprietary structural soil blends in Amsterdam, as well as Sweden, Switzerland, and beyond. Structural soil can also be used as a retrofit strategy when paving is being replaced. Careful removal and thoughtful planning consisting of pneumatic excavation combined with CU soil and a dry-laid paving installation delivered a successful repaving of the area around this mature Cercidophyllum japonicum. It is important to note that structural soils, regardless of their producer or proprietary formula, were designed as substrate under paving materials. They were never designed to be used as a planting medium. Trees should only be planted into a soil that is compatible with the soil in which they were grown. All such initiatives come with a higher price tag than a standard concrete repaving, but the resulting cost to benefit is of no comparison when one considers the enhanced ES benefits combined with avoided costs, reduced infrastructure damage caused by tree root growth, and reduced tree maintenance costs as a result of infrastructure-related damage to the tree. What's most important is that the tree's life is extended with the probability of greatly enhanced root growth accommodation. Careful consideration has to be given to location, use, and expected pollutants in order to determine the most appropriate paving solution. Planning and design, how we construct our built environment. While planners, designers, and urban foresters do not directly construct, we do so indirectly with the design and build specifications we craft. In spatial development, the building process is given a great deal of consideration. As a result, building practices have evolved, but landscape impacting construction practices have not kept pace. Although there are numerous strategies for eliminating or limiting damage to important hardscape features, these practices have rarely been applied to trees or the landscapes which will be impacted by the project. We should not expect the design team or construction contractors to understand the workings of trees and soil. Urban foresters must be the initiators and the actualizers of any and all practices which reduce or eliminate impact or destruction of environmental resources. Specifications and the oversight they require are the tools that can effectively realize ecological design in all areas where trees are sharing space with spatial development. Such detailed specification must include the following strategies within the varied phases of build and design. The planning phase. Although planning is part of construction's design phase, for our purposes, I have separated them as what we do in planning lays the groundwork for what will happen throughout the design phase. A complete ground-based inventory to be conducted by an urban forester or an arborist of all trees within the project footprint, as well as those trees within close enough proximity as to have their critical structural roots within the project area. This inventory should not only include species, GPS-based location, structural metrics and condition, but also a soil assessment to determine existing compaction and an iTree echo assessment to determine ES benefits and their value. Assess trees' condition and structural stability are important determinants for retention. Our expert evaluation of collected data combined with the total value per tree will help determine protection and retention strategies, and thus inform where and how built installations will be constructed. The design phase determines how the project can be built in conjunction with tree and landscape protection needs. Construction equipment, drainage and grading, utility installations, storing of excavated soil, staging requirements, control of construction debris, spillage, washout, and sediment, as well as parking of project-related vehicles. A thorough understanding of all of this can contribute to discussions that will determine construction strategies that support protection. To install pipes, conduits, cables, and the like, tree and landscape friendly design must consider the use of trenchless technology, normally only used to preserve hardscape features, to tunnel under roots. These strategies include microtunneling or jacking with send-receive pits, which must be well-sited and capable of receiving and sending so as to reduce impacts. The dimensions of the excavation will determine the need to sheet and shore to increase structural integrity. Horizontal drilling or auger boring, another form of trenchless technology, uses a surface-to-surface approach rather than a send-receive pit. As with all such processes, adequate space for equipment operation must be predetermined and defined, requiring a familiarity with the equipment and its operating criteria. Each technology has its pros and cons, and the selection of a project-appropriate strategy, including the avoidance of soil heaving, will require knowledgeable and experienced partners. Pre-construction phase. Once the project design has been completed, with the work footprint set and tree and landscape protection designated, the following actions must be required and included in project specifications. For trees within the project work footprint, any and all excavation must exclude each tree's protected ecological root footprint according to Dr. Kim Coder's research parameters. For trees landscapes, all at the defined perimeter of the project's work footprint, as well as for any areas that have been determined as requiring protection, a tree and landscape protection zone, or TLPZ, must be established and a significant protection fence installed prior to the commencement of any and all work, with the additional requirement that the fence can only be removed and the protected area accessed with prior written approval and in the presence of the project consulting arborist. The TLPZ footprint, as well as the fence, must be noted on detailed plan drawings. The structural roots of all protected trees that extend into the work footprint should be accessed using pneumatic excavation, such as an air spade, along with an air vac to collect the removed soil. Enabling accurate and root pruning perpendicular to the root's growth at the point of the cut of one root zone quadrant, the wrapping of exposed roots using moist burlap, and the replacement of removed soil immediately following pruning. The entire impacted area must then be mulched and well irrigated. This enables work to proceed unimpeded and without concern for protected trees having roots within the work footprint. The completion of the design phase will also determine the equipment to be used as well as its operating radius. Such equipment may warrant the need for clearance pruning, especially along the TLPZ fence line. The specification must define the professional expertise required to perform all such tree and landscape-related tasks, a certified arborist or equivalent. In addition, the specification must require oversight from the project consulting arborist during any and all such operations to ensure the use of best management practices and the upholding of all tree and landscape protection criteria. A thorough irrigation of any and all protected trees and the landscapes they populate 2 to 3 days preceding clearance pruning and the commencement of construction activities will improve the ability of protected trees to withstand the stress and trauma of construction. The construction phase. The need to access a TLPZ or traverse any tree-populated landscape requires the oversight of the project consulting arborist, along with additional access-specific tree and landscape protection. The TLPZ immediately around each tree should receive an installation of composted wood chip mulch 7.5 to 10 centimeters in depth, with a setback of 15 to 30 centimeters from the base of the trunk to be determined by the extent of the exposed buttress area. If the TLPZ requires construction equipment access, additional protection measures must be introduced in the form of ramped interlocking ground protection mats installed over geotextile fabric plus wood chips 30 centimeters deep, the combination of which greatly reduces the probability of soil compaction. It is highly recommended that utility service lines be placed in a conduit either in the roadway or located outside the existing as well as anticipated structural root zone of retained trees. Post-construction. Following completion of construction, the project consulting arborist must conduct an inspection based on the initial inventory to determine the extent of any impacts such as soil compaction within the TLPZ. Soil compaction is best, soil decompaction is best accomplished by specifying radial trenching with the use of pneumatic excavation, PE, such as an air spade. The procedure uses PE to excavate radial aligned trenches around the tree with a setback equal to 3.5 times the radius of the tree's diameter. The soil from the trenches is retained with the use of an attached air vac and, with organic compost added, returned to the radial trenches. This should be followed by a compost tea soil drench, composted wood chip mulch as previously detailed, and then thoroughly watered in. Consideration conclusions. The considerations offered are intended as a provocative sampling of possibilities. In exploring them, my thoughts often turned to Ian McHogg and the concepts he illustrated in his seminal work, Design with Nature. That all design must be informed by an ecological perspective, that design and its outcomes had to support all aspects of life, not just human, but the entirety, not just in a mindful way, but synergistically, symbiotically, providing a catalyst for the concepts offered. While specifications usually fall to planners, architects, and landscape architects, and we as urban foresters do not wish to take over their professional roles, it is essential that in developing an ecological approach to designing and building the tree-built environment, our expertise must be required. Excuses such as the project budget cannot afford to do it that way, or we've never done it this way before, are not acceptable. There is too much wrong with the corners that business as usual cuts, and too much at stake. The sustained health and well-being of all organic components of the urban ecosystem require an interdisciplinary incorporation of art, science, theory, and practice into every aspect of spatial development. Planning and design must focus on implementing ecologically creative solutions so that the end result is a sustainable, environmentally compatible built environment which can accommodate the needs of our urban trees, the landscapes they populate, and citizen well-being. What is needed is consideration of the tree. We have the knowledge. We just need to enable it. Many thanks for your very kind attention.